All right, guys, welcome back for another week. And this is actually part 3 of our What Are Your Questions? And it's kind of funny because, we broke up part 1 and 2 because you gave so many questions. And in those questions, you kind of lobbed me some just fun questions to answer or whatever. What fun for me, just light questions. But this time around, you guys went all out on hard questions. There wasn't like one easy-ish question in there. They were all like thinkers, and they were all like, man, you're really going to give me that one, huh? Like, they were all great questions though. I love it. I love every single moment of it. So if you guys want another question night, if you have more questions, just let me know. I'll open up another Slido. We'll open it up for another week and we'll answer those questions next week. But if not, I'll figure something out. But if you like this, just keep them coming to me or let me know so I can open up another Slido for us. So let's go ahead and dive right into the questions. We have 11 questions tonight, and we're going to get through them. So it's going to be fun. All right, so let's see what we have. The first one is, how can you believe in something that can't be scientifically proven? And when I got this question, I thought it was super interesting. And I wish, again, I could always ask those clarifying questions by what do you mean by, something, and what do you mean by proven? Because something could literally be anything. And proven, like, do you mean beyond a shadow of doubt? Or do you mean like that we could reason to a conclusion that it can be true? So that's what I would first want to know, what you mean by that. And so before I actually get to answering this, I want you to think about something for a second. I'm going to ask you some questions and just answer them to yourself. Do you believe in logic or gravity or the scientific method, or that there are other minds other than your own, or in beauty, or that the killing of innocent Jews in World War II was wrong? Do you believe in any of those things? Because if you answered yes, well, then you believe in something that can't be proven scientifically. And science is a great thing, but it's not the only way to know reality. Meaning, science can't prove everything that we know. And going back to that list, you might believe in some of those things that science can't prove. And while we might disagree on some of the things, maybe we disagree on what's beautiful, but that doesn't mean that beauty doesn't exist. Or maybe we might disagree that, the things that happened during the Holocaust were wrong, but that doesn't mean that right and wrong don't exist. And, when we come to those conclusions aren't made by science. They're made by our reason. And, we might agree that there are more bodies or more minds than just our own, but how do we actually prove that? Because science can't prove that. Science can't prove our conscience, that I'm not just me and there's only me. And so we use reason and we use logic to come to these conclusions which science can't prove. When you hear that someone is a bachelor, that they're not married, you don't go to a science lab. You don't go to somewhere where they're going to draw your blood to test if you're a bachelor or not. No, you use your reason to say, like, okay, well, are they married or not? If they're married, well, then they're not a bachelor. But if they're unmarried, well, then they're a bachelor. But that's something that science doesn't prove. You use your reason for that. And so while we have all these reasons to believe in those things that I listed earlier, I believe we also have similar reasons, or we can use our reason to come to the conclusion that God exists. And the funny thing is that science is a tool that we use to come up with those reasons or come up with those conclusions. For example, the beginning of the universe all points that there had to be a beginner, someone who started it all. Or the fine tuning of the universe. There are over 100 constants that have to be perfectly set for life to exist. And who set those constants? Who set those little dials to where they exactly need to be for us to even be having this conversation? And it's crazy because Earth itself, it rests in this Goldilocks area where it's not too hot and not too cold. The sun and how we're tilted on our axis, and we're the sun's gravitational pull and the moon's gravitational pull puts us in this just Goldilocks area where if it's too hot, life doesn't exist. If it's too cold, life doesn't exist. And like, how did we even get our moon to like make that happen? Like, it's crazy to me. The fine tuning of the universe points to someone to tune those things. But also DNA, the blueprint of life, right? If there's a blueprint, well, then there had to be an architect of some sort to draw up those plans. And who drew up those plans? Did it happen just by accident? Pretty unlikely, I would say, because you don't see a watch on the beach and say, oh man, this watch came together by the waves crashing up against the rocks, which made sand, which made this watch. No, you say someone designed that watch. And so who's the designer of all those things? But then also right and wrong. I think right and wrong draws us to the conclusion that there has to be a moral lawgiver. If there are moral laws in the world, who made them up? It's not just might makes right. It's not just what I say versus what you say. It's not just cultural. It's more than that. And so if there's a moral law, there has to be a moral lawgiver. And so some of these things, I mean, are, help us come to those conclusions through science, while some others are just using our reason. But long story short, people believe in a lot of things that can't be scientifically proven. But science alone isn't the only way to discover reality. It's a tool that we use to discover reality, but it's not the only way. We use reason and logic to discover those things. So, great question. Hopefully that answers something. I don't even know if that was what you're exactly asking, but yeah. Question number 2. If being straight is okay, why isn't being gay? Shouldn't they be the same? Yeah, I totally think they should be the same. Being straight is okay. Being gay is okay. But if you're asking if you're okay with God, I think it's a different story, because even if you're straight, that doesn't mean you're okay with God. And just like even if you're gay, it doesn't mean that you're going to hell. Being straight or being gay has nothing to do with how well you relate to God. It just doesn't. What it really comes down to is, are you trying to be your own Lord and Savior? If God is God and he's the creator of the universe, then he ultimately knows what's best for you. And so if he ultimately knows what's best for you, and he has set, some rules or some standards, and you say, yeah, I see those, but I'm just going to do whatever I feel is right for me, well, then there's a problem in that relationship. You're saying that I know better than God on how to live. And so, there are an array of things that we do that in. Sex is just one of those things, but, deciding on who we hate, or things like divorce and lust and greed, all those things. Here's the thing, like, Christ has come to make us free, but to be free doesn't mean that we just do whatever we want. Just because we have desires to do something doesn't mean that those desires are okay. And we've kind of talked about this a little bit last week. In fact, we've had this whole discussion on Old Topics, New Conversations that happen Thursday nights at 8:15. Small little plug there. But I think we're in like week 4 of that. So if you want to know more about that question, if you want to know a little more in depth of what we've talked about, that go to our YouTube page and look up OTNC, Old Topics, New Conversations. It's hopefully good. You can just leave a comment if you have any more questions, or email me directly. But yeah, that's question number 2. Question number 3. This is where it gets really interesting, really dicey, really fast. Again, you guys didn't throw me any softballs. These are all pretty in-depth questions that I've loved every single one of them. So, is being a pedophile okay if you don't act on it? Great question, right? Easy, right? No, it's not easy. And when we answer this question, when we look at this question, I think it's important that we be careful with our words, because, just saying the word pedophile has so many, connotations to it. It has so many meanings behind it that, people's backgrounds, people's relation to that word, whatever it might be, like, just people have so many thoughts behind it. And so I think a better word that I'm going to use for this question is people who have or who are attracted to young children, because I think it's more specific to what we're actually asking, because usually pedophile is related to someone who's already committed a crime or who has already committed an act. But if you're just attracted to young children, I think that's a little bit different, a lot different actually. So And I'm actually going to combine this question with another question that was asked later on down the list. But the other question was, shouldn't pedophiles be more welcome to society so they aren't hiding the fact that they are pedophiles to be around kids? Again, people who commit crimes against children, I think, need to have some justice. I think justice needs to be served because, again, these are crimes against children. Children don't have people to speak up for themselves or stand up for themselves. So I think there's no gray area in that. But I also think we all have messed up desires, and this is one of them. Again, just because something is natural doesn't mean that it's okay. Just because you have a natural desire to do something, whether it's sexually, morally, whatever it might be, doesn't mean that it's okay. This is just one of those things. But I also think that the church itself does need to respond or welcome these people in some type of warm way that I haven't seen really done before. I mean, I know there are churches who do this, but I mean, the majority of churches don't. I think it's out of fear or just something that we don't talk enough about. And I think when we don't talk about stuff like that, it's very dangerous in the sense of it goes by unseen, where people do cross over and they do stuff in the dark. So I do think people need to be welcome. I don't know what it looks like or how it would be executed. I just haven't done or looked into it much, but I think it is one of those things that Jesus would do. But I have no idea what that would look like. And so I guess to clear things up, I think we need to be the church to these people. I think they need to be loved. I think they need to have a place. What that looks like or how we do it, I don't know. But also, crimes committed against children need to have justice. Justice needs to be served in those instances. So, yeah. Question number 4. Did you have sex before marriage? Man, you guys are interested in my dirty laundry, aren't you? Last week we got the question of, did you drink before you're 21? And now you guys want to know about my sex life. Wow, you guys are crazy dudes. Listen, you guys know that I'm an open book. You guys can ask me any question and I'll answer it. I'll talk to you about it. But I will have to say this, and there's a big but there, that my life really isn't my own. If you guys forget or don't know, I am married and I do have kids and I have to think about them. So if I were a single guy and if it was just me and I didn't have anyone else to worry about, this would be an answer, or I would easily give an answer to this because it's no problem. I just have to worry about myself. But because I have a wife, because I have kids, I do have to think about them. So I'm not going to answer this question here. But if you do have the cojones to ask me in person, I would gladly have this conversation with you because, again, I don't have anything to hide. I'm an open book, but this just isn't the format or platform for this because it's not. You weirdos, stop asking weirdo questions. You got some weirdos out there on the internet. Question number 5. Can you believe in God and evolution? And before I answer this one, if you have any other follow-up questions on the previous questions, whether this week, the last week, or the week before that, let me know. If I need to open up a Slido for that, I'll do it. I want to have clarifying questions. I want to have more conversations or answers, whatever it is. Because some of these are just like, what do you think about this? And it's like, okay, you can ask about my opinion, but then some of them are like, what does the Bible say about this? So, yeah, whatever it is, you just let me know. Back to question number 5. Can you believe in God and evolution? Sure you can. You can totally do that. It's called theistic evolution. And it's the belief that basically that evolution is true, but that God put it in motion. That's theistic evolution, that God started everything and he used evolution as a means to get to where we are now. It's God guided. And the idea of evolution or creationism, like those are non-essential things to being a believer or your salvation, if that makes sense. And what I mean by not essential, that there are things that the church can totally disagree on, I should say. And things like how the church is ran, evolution, creation, free will, or being predestined. All those things are non-essential. Like You can believe or not believe in those things, and your salvation isn't at risk. I would say that they're just not. I don't know. Maybe I should talk about the essential things that'll be more clear. But the essential things are like, who is God? Who is Jesus? How do you gain your salvation? Or how are you saved from your sins? Those are essential questions that all need to have a right answer, because if they're not, then your salvation and your security in heaven is kind of on the fence a little bit. Because if you think God to be a man who lived on another planet, who also had his own God, well, then your definition of God might be off. And then if your definition of Jesus is just another good teacher or prophet, but he wasn't actually God or the Son of God, well, then you also have something else. Or if he didn't die on the cross, or those types of things. Or even if how you are saved from your sins, if you're saved from your sins by just working, or God gets you halfway, but then you have to show that you're really earnest and honest and proving yourself, well then there's some question there. So those are the essential things of Christianity. But the non-essential things are how a church is ran, and evolution, creationism, free will, predestined. So can you believe in God and evolution? Totally. Theistic evolution. There's some really good books out there. Maybe I'll put them in the notes for us if you want to look into that. Question number 6, do you support the death penalty? It's hard to say, because so when it comes to like political questions, I get stumped in a way, or they're harder to think about because there's so much politics behind it. And that's the problem with me, is like I have this logical brain, but I also have this spiritual brain where it's like, okay, what would God say, or what would God do? And when I think about these issues, they're so politicized that they're just frustrating. So I don't know. I can't give you a straight answer here, but I do believe in justice. Death penalty is just one of those things where I'm just, it's too political for me to even think clearly about in the sense of a biblical perspective. So that's what I would say about that. Good answer, right? Why is listening to music with negative language if you don't let the music affect your lifestyle? I think the word bad is supposed to be in there somewhere, but why is listening to music with negative language bad if you don't let the music affect your lifestyle? And you're right. The things that you put in your body, the things that you listen to, the things that you do or eat or whatever, like those don't make you bad people. But I'm also kind of a believer that you are who you hang out with, or to take it a step further, you are who you associate yourself with, whether that's people or things. So my question, to throw it out there, is how are you associated with this negative language or negative whatever it might be in the music or movies or lifestyle that you're living? Because I don't know what language you're talking about or where you draw the line between what's negative and non-negative, but to say that it doesn't affect your lifestyle is also a hard thing to measure, because you don't really have a good idea. You're you inside of you. If you're listening to hardcore gangster rap in the 90s, they spoke about a lot of things that they knew, and a lot of things that they knew were drugs and pimps and hoes and killing and all that stuff. And for everyone else in the world that this wasn't their life, a little bit of this was glorified, because here these guys are talking about their culture that they live in, and yet they're making tons of money and performing of thousands of people. I remember trying to be cool and trying to be one of those street gangster rapper guys, as hard as that is to believe, but I tried, and it wasn't like I was really doing anything. It wasn't like I was selling coke or going on drive-bys or beating up people. But the funny thing is that I did play a game called Drive-By and I did try to dress like them. And it was affecting me in some type of way. And maybe you don't know what that looks like, but the questions that I would think of is like, Are they desensitizing you to some things? Are you more inclined to think subconsciously about certain people in a certain way because of the things you listen to? I mean, do you glorify or objectify certain things that you wouldn't have, say you hadn't listened to it? I don't know, but I do agree that listening to negative stuff, whatever negative stuff is, doesn't make you bad, but I think it does reveal the bad that's already inside of you, if that makes sense. That there's some type of association. I don't know what exactly, but I think you are who you hang out with. I think you are who you associate with. So if this does reveal your heart just a little bit, that it's more than just a beat, it's more than just a hook, it's more than just a line, but that there's something deeper there. Because, I mean, you can find that same beat, you can find similar hooks, you can find similar lines in other types of music that don't exactly go with negative language or negative whatever it might be. So, but maybe I'm wrong. Let me know what you think. That's actually, yeah, what do you guys think? You think listening to bad music will make you bad, or is it revealing something that's already there? I don't know. Let me know. What's your opinion on being transgender? So if you don't know what transgender means, to put it in a nutshell, it basically means that a person might feel that their biological gender or their biological sex doesn't match their psychological gender. Or to easier put it, people just feel the opposite gender than what they were born. So you might have all the body parts of a female, but everything else is male, psychologically, all those types of things. Or you might know transgender as gender dysphoria, where dysphoria basically means that you just had to have a dissatisfaction about something. So put gender dysphoria together, you have a dissatisfaction about your gender. So what's my opinion on being transgender? It's kind of a broad question, so I'm going to kind of give it a broad answer. Do I think people have gender dysphoria? Yeah, I do, but I also think that people have dysphoria about a lot of things, whether it's their height, their weight, their wealth, their friends or lack of friends. I think people are dissatisfied with a lot of things about their lives. So to have a dysphoria about your gender, yeah, I totally think you can have that. But just because I believe that it exists and that people have it and that they struggle with it, it doesn't mean that I affirm the behavior or the actions because of it. Because again, you can have a feeling about one thing, but it doesn't mean that it's right. And I don't mean to sound not compassionate about this or that I don't care or that it's just a flippant issue, but I think I'm trying to answer in a broad way, and it is a struggle, a real struggle for people to go through this because it's a whole body and mind type of thing, and they almost think that they're separate. But I think God tells us that your body and mind are your spirit or your core are one, and so just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean that it's God's will for you. And I think that's the biggest struggle, because the exterior is one way, but the inner is like there's something else. And so there's this inner turmoil. But I think that's with a lot of things. How we perceive ourselves isn't always the most accurate view of who we are. I mean, I think this is what sin does to us a lot of the time, that we think we're unlovable and we think we're not worth it. And we think all of these negative things because that's our perception, but that's not the reality of how God views us. So, and I think this kind of applies to gender dysphoria, that how you perceive yourself isn't always the most accurate view. Again, not to doubt that people with just gender dysphoria don't have a huge struggle or to downplay that or any way, but I think the perception of themselves can be wrong. Just like, for example, in this analogy, no way is perfect in any way, but someone who has anorexia has body dysmorphia, right? They have a dissatisfaction with their body. And even though they have a view of themselves, I think most people would say that's an inaccurate view of the reality. Their perception of themselves doesn't match reality. Their perception of themselves is off. Their feelings are off. And I think in a similar way, you can think of gender dysphoria, that I don't think the most truthful perception is, on display for themselves. So what do I think about gender dysphoria? That's kind of what I think about it. Do I think people have it? Yes. Just because people have it and it's, natural, or, they've had it since as long as they can remember. Do I think it's God's will for them? No. I don't mean to sound uncompassionate about that. Question number 9. If your child was gay, would you accept them? Yep. He's my kid. He's always going to be my kid. I'm always going to accept him. Always going to love him. Always going to welcome him in. He's always going to be mine. So, of course. 10. Do you think that 2 gay people should be able to get married? And if 2 gay people get married, is it a sin? This is kind of a difficult question, because it's almost like you're putting one question, but they're in 2 different categories. It's almost like saying, what smell is the color orange? Maybe that's a bad example. It's like, what taste is the color blue? Yeah, maybe that's better. What taste is the color blue? Something like that, along those lines, because there's like a government side, but then there's also the spiritual side when we talk about marriage, because marriage is, on the government side, it's a very legal, action. You're making a legal contract with somebody. So has a lot to do with property and benefits and taxes and, all those types of things. But then there's also the spiritual side of things, which have nothing to do with those things really. And it's way more than just legal stuff. And for that reason, I would even say that, for some straight people or opposite sex couples, like, you shouldn't get married. Like, it's more than just a legal governmental contract. It's there's something more to it. And so on the government side, I'm almost like, yeah, get married or whatever. But then I also have to think of the spiritual side. I'm like, no, don't get married. Like, this is more than you think. It's not just a legal contract that you're making with the government or whatever. It's something way deeper than that. So when you ask about, though, is it a sin? That's where you have to look at who designed it. I think you have to look past the legal stuff or the government stuff and say, like, okay, if we're asking about a sin, now we're asking about how and who designed marriage. Who designed marriage, and in this marriage covenant, how did he design it? What did he plan for it to look like? So gay people getting married, I get it. I know why they'd want to do it, but is it a sin? Now I have to look at the designer and how he designed it. It's not just my opinion anymore, but it's actually looking at almost like the blueprints of how things work. If someone's looking at a blueprint of a house and say, hey, is this house wrong? It's like, well, I don't know. Let me look at the blueprint of it. And I have to look at the blueprint of marriage. How was that designed? So to kind of wrap it up, 2 people getting married, or 2 gay people getting married, is that okay? Well, it's not really up to my opinion on that. I have to kind of look at the blueprints of that. How was it designed and who designed it? If it was just Joe Blow over there who designed it, and he says, oh yeah, 2 people who are gay can't get married, well, there's not a lot of authority there. But if there's more than that, I kind of have to look at God. And if God designed it, well, there's more on the line than just Joe Blow over there. So to kind of wrap this up, and I think this is the tension that we feel, because it's tempting to see a loving, committed gay couple that, almost exemplify this godly relationship, and especially when they're compared to really bad Christian relationships that you're just like, oh my gosh, why are they together? These unloving, unfaithful people. gosh, why is that? Which is, again, why I'll say some straight people just shouldn't get married right now, or to that person, or at that time. But however, I think the Bible is pretty clear on same-sex marriages, that they're just outside of God's plan. And no matter how good they look, I think we still have to go back to who designed it and how he designed it, which is an interesting question, because how and why are some same-sex couples, why do they have such good relationships? Like, that's an interesting question, right? And I think the answer is because you don't have to be Christian to be moral. You don't have to be Christian to have a good relationship. You don't have to be Christian to do good things. I don't want you to confuse that with anything. We're not saying that atheists or Buddhists or Muslims or whatever religion or whatever ideology you have doesn't mean that you can't be a good person. But I think those good morals and those good things are founded in God's character. And so when you say, is something wrong or is something a sin, you have to look back at where those things originated from. And I think it originates with God. And so if you ask if marriage between two gay people is a sin, well, then you have to look at who designed it. How did he intend it? So that's question number 10. No, yeah. Question number 11. This is our last one. So good for us. Do you think God is going to come back to... Man, I am a horrible reader, and now you guys get to witness it in real time of how bad I am. I just don't know how to read. But do you think God is going to come back in earth? Maybe it's supposed to be to earth? Do I think he's going to come back in earth? I don't think so. Do I think he's going to come back to earth? Yes. I think Revelation tells us that, even though there are some ideas that some of the things that John writes down in Revelation are contemporary with this time, and I can't remember if it's like a preterist. I think it's called the preterist idea, that some of those visions and some of those things are pointing back to things that are happening during his just what's going on in his life at that time. But I also think that Jesus is going to come back, not in the earth, but on the earth. So, or in the heavens even. So let me know if we want to do another Slido, if we want to do another question night, if you have any follow-up questions that you want to ask to these questions, that'd be great. And I'm enjoying these, so I hope you guys are getting something out of them. And share them with your friends, share them with your parents, maybe, I don't know. Share them. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.
I'm trying to